Hi, I'm Lazaro. My family asked me to save their home, so I paid the mortgage, quietly, month after month. No thanks, no birthday calls, just silence. Then one day, I found out I wasn't even invited to Christmas dinner. My name had been removed, on purpose. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the fake signatures, the cropped photos, the message I wasn't supposed to hear. And when they knocked on my door, they didn't come with apologies. They came with foreclosure notices. What would you do if the people you loved most treated you like a backup plan? Would you still open the door? The December wind had a way of cutting through denim, even when layered under a flannel shirt and work jacket. I pulled into my parking spot just past 6. The sky was already dark, the street lamps casting long shadows across the lot. I sat there a minute longer than usual, engine ticking, before finally turning the key and stepping out. The cold bit at my ears and nose as I made my way to the building. Inside my apartment, the heater was humming like a tired dog. Not broken, but not working right either. Just like most things in that place. It was home, though. Mine. No roommates, no questions. Just 4 walls, my name on the lease, and enough silence to make a man feel both powerful and completely invisible. I dropped my lunch cooler on the counter and toed off my boots. Dust from the site still clung to my jeans. I'd clean it up later. I flipped on the lamp near the couch, casting the room in that soft yellow I'd gotten used to. Then I sat down, legs wide, elbows on knees, and reached for my phone. It buzzed as I picked it up. New email. The subject line read, "Christmas dinner, confirming attendees." A part of me tensed before I even opened it. We'd always done the big family dinner, potluck style. Coraline would bring her casserole, Thaddeus carving the ham. I used to pay for most of it without fanfare. Just a card number and a shrug when they protested. Let me do this for once. I tapped the message open. Scrolled. Coraline's message was cheerful. Leander had agreed to host. Everyone was excited. She asked everyone to reply so she could plan for seating. The list of names came next. Cousins, aunts, Gordon and Delilah, the neighbors, but not me. I blinked. Scrolled again. No Lazaro, no Zed, nothing. I refreshed the email, closed it, reopened. Same result. A few replies started rolling in. We'll be there. Can I bring rolls? Happy to help decorate. Still nothing addressed to me. I sat very still. The heater hummed. The silence in my chest got louder. It wasn't the first time they forgot something small. My birthday had come and gone without a call more than once. But this? Christmas? The one time of year even broken families pretended. I called Coraline. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Oh, hey, sweetheart," she said, as if everything was normal. "Hey," I said back, voice calm. "I just saw the email. You left me off the list." There was a pause. Long enough for me to hear her breathing. "Well," she said slowly, "Leander's just been really overwhelmed lately with the house and everything, and it felt like this year we should keep it low-key." "You mean without me?" "No, I mean, just less pressure. He needs space, you know how he gets. It's nothing personal." That phrase, nothing personal, like a layoff, like a punch to the stomach with a smile. "Right," I said, "of course." The silence stretched. "Is there anything else?" she asked gently. "No," I said, and hung up. I didn't throw my phone, didn't swear. I just sat there, staring at the soft light and the specks of dust dancing in it. A week ago, I'd sent a package to their house, a thick winter quilt. Handmade by a local shop I liked. Cost me more than I could afford, but I figured it was something useful, warm, thoughtful. The package came back 2 days later. Inside was a sticky note. "You shouldn't waste your money on us." I didn't argue, but 2 nights after that, during a video call with Gordon, he'd called about a broken gutter, I saw the quilt, laid across Leander's bed in the background like it had always belonged there. I didn't say a word, just smiled, asked about the repair, and logged off. That image stuck with me more than the email. I showed up at work the next day, did my shift. The guys joked as usual. Someone clapped my back, said, "Bet your folks are proud. You work harder than any of us." I smiled, nodded, didn't correct him. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "If I don't exist to them, maybe I should stop trying to." The heater clicked off again. The window fogged from the inside. I stood and walked over, pressing my forehead lightly to the glass. The snow outside had picked up. Big flakes this time, heavy ones, floating like they had nowhere urgent to land. Behind me, the apartment was still. I looked out at the dark street, the parked cars, the flickering street lamp on the corner, and whispered to no one. Not even a seat at the table. But the memory of that dinner, and where they sat me, still haunted me. The snow was falling just like that night, heavy and slow, blanketing everything with a silence that felt too familiar. I stood at the window, hands shoved into the pockets of the same coat I'd worn to that last family dinner. The sleeves were fraying, the zipper sticky near the top. I hadn't replaced it. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of some quiet loyalty to the version of me who once thought showing up was enough. It had been Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. They'd asked me to come a little early to help set up, which mostly meant lifting tables and moving chairs. By the time the food was out, most of the good seats were taken. Thaddeus and Coraline sat at the center, laughing with Leander on one side and our Aunt Colleen on the other. I ended up at the folding table they'd squeezed near the kitchen doorway, squeezed between a coat rack and the trash can. Not even joking. My seat faced a bin filled with carrot peels and used foil. The plate they handed me wasn't part of the matching set everyone else had. I got one of those plastic ones with the weird bend in the middle. My fork felt flimsy in my hand. When I stood up after dinner and offered to clear some dishes, Coraline said without looking at me, "You've done enough, honey." She meant it kindly. That was the worst part. I sat back down and stared at my drink, lukewarm cranberry juice in a paper cup. I didn't stay long that night. Told them I had work early, though it was a holiday weekend. The snow had started then, too, soft at first, then building. I walked to my truck alone, coat buttoned wrong, pretending I was in a hurry. That moment hadn't resurfaced in months, until now. The way it wrapped around my ribs tonight made breathing feel like chewing tinfoil. I stepped away from the window, rubbing the back of my neck. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, charging. I picked it up, thumb hovering, then opened Facebook. Coraline's profile popped up first. She'd posted earlier that day. The new cover photo was from last Sunday's church service. Everyone dressed up, posed just right in front of the red doors of St. Joseph's. Thaddeus in his wool coat. Coraline's scarf matched her gloves. Leander, hands in his pockets, slight smirk on his face like he was enduring it all for show. And I wasn't in it. It took me a second to realize why it felt familiar. It was the same photo from Thanksgiving, same pose, same outfits, same background. But this one was cropped. In the original, I'd been standing on the end, holding the camera's remote. You could barely see me. But still, I'd been there. Now I was gone. Not blurred, not tagged wrong, just gone. There were a few comments below. Beautiful family. Love this. Everyone looks so happy. I didn't comment, didn't like it, just closed the app. I paced a bit, then went to the fridge. Leftover takeout waited for me, a carton of lo mein and a half-full bottle of ginger ale. I ate standing at the counter, chopsticks tapping the edge of the container as I chewed. No text from Coraline, no call from Thaddeus, Not even a casual thinking of you from Leander, which would have been disingenuous but still something. That silence was telling. It wasn't just forgetfulness. It was intent. I rinsed my container, tossed it in the trash, and leaned against the sink. The apartment was warm now, too warm, the heat working overtime against the cold outside. Maybe I am easier to remove than I thought, I said to the faucet. The sentence didn't feel dramatic. It felt accurate. Back in the living room, I sat on the couch and opened the group chat with Coraline and Thaddeus, scrolled up, read the Thanksgiving messages, the Christmas plans from last year, my sent photos, my thank you for dinner texts that never got a reply. I stared at the text bar, then tapped Leave Conversation. Before closing the thread, I selected Delete. The screen went blank, but it wasn't just the silence that finally broke me. It was what I wasn't meant to hear. It happened on a Tuesday, right in the middle of a drywall install. My phone buzzed in my pocket, nothing unusual. I was on break, sitting on an overturned bucket in the break room with half a sandwich in my hand and concrete dust in my nostrils. I pulled out my phone and wiped the screen with my sleeve. There it was, a new message in the family group chat. That chat rarely pinged anymore. At first I thought it was just another forwarded meme or maybe a weather warning, but it was a direct message from Coraline. One line. Just one. Don't worry, we'll make sure Lazaro doesn't show up. It was meant for Leander, that much was clear, but she'd sent it to the entire group. I stared at it for a while. The timestamp. The read receipts. Everyone had seen it, no one responded. Not a single apology. No, oops, sorry, wrong chat. Not even a generic deflection like, that wasn't what I meant. Silence. And that silence said more than any words could. My sandwich suddenly tasted like cardboard. I set it down and stood up slowly. The sound of power tools outside felt distant. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, too steady, like my body had decided this wasn't a surprise at all. Just confirmation. I finished the day. Didn't leave early, didn't speak much. My hands worked like they were attached to someone else. I measured, cut, and mounted panels, smiled at the right moments, nodded when someone asked if I was good. Yeah, all good. But my head was replaying that message like a stuck loop. That evening, on my way home, I stopped by Foster's Market to grab some milk and paper towels. The place was half-lit and quiet, like most evenings that late in the week. I grabbed what I needed and turned into aisle 3, cleaning supplies, when I heard someone behind me. Lazaro? I turned. Delilah stood there with her little shopping basket. Her gloves were mismatched, one blue, one gray, and she wore her Sunday church coat, the kind with the faux fur collar she'd had for years. Hey, I said, managing a small smile. She looked at me for a moment, then stepped closer. I saw what happened. The message. Gordon showed me. He was upset. Of course he was. Gordon didn't say much, but he wasn't the type to pretend either. Delilah continued, voice softer now. You've been the spine of that house for years. We all saw it. We just didn't say anything. Shame on us. But don't you ever think they made you small. They only made themselves look smaller. Her words cut deeper than she probably knew, not because they hurt, but because they healed a part I didn't realize was still open. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. She gave my arm a gentle pat before moving past me. After checking out and returning to my truck, I sat in the lot for a few minutes, watching a couple walk out of the store, laughing over something small, their breath clouded in the cold air. I looked down at my phone. The message was still there, unread again and again. Back home, I changed out of my work clothes, heated up the rest of last night's casserole, and sat on the couch with the TV on mute. My phone sat next to me, charging. Its screen glowed with idle notifications. I opened the message thread again. My thumb hovered over the reply bar. I typed, "That hurt." Deleted it. Typed, "You could have just told me the truth." Deleted it again. Eventually, I just stared at the empty box, then backed out of the chat completely. No calls had come, no texts to explain, to soften the blow. Nothing from Coraline, not even a reaction emoji. They were ready to erase me. I figured I'd let them. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the lamp casting a warm circle of light over the papers scattered there. I opened a browser and logged into my bank's portal. My eyes scanned through the recent payments, the monthly mortgage support I'd been quietly sending for over 2 years. I navigated to the auto payment section. My cursor hovered over the Cancel Recurring Payment button, and I didn't hesitate. They did ask, but not the way I expected. 2 days had passed since I deleted the group chat, since I read, reread, and memorized that accidental message. And during those 48 hours, not a single call had come. Not from Coraline, not from Thaddeus, not from Leander. That silence gave me something I hadn't had in years, space to think. Real space. Not the kind they used as an excuse to exclude me, but the kind you carve out for yourself when you're finally tired of being carved out of others. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, the air outside biting through the window glass. I had the heating on, but it still felt like the cold knew how to sneak in around the frame. My laptop screen glowed faintly in front of me. The banking portal was open, cursor blinking next to the scheduled transaction I'd set up 2 years ago. The monthly mortgage payment, $583 like clockwork. My fingers hovered. Not from hesitation, but from habit. That recurring payment had been a lifeline for them. But for me, it had become a leash. One they'd never even asked if I could afford. One I'd never thought to question. Until now. Click. Recurring payment settings. Click. Cancel payment. A final confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this automatic payment? I exhaled through my nose and clicked yes. The screen updated. Recurring payment removed. That was it. No confetti, no alarm bells, just a quiet message on a screen telling me what I already knew. Something had shifted. I took a screenshot. Not to gloat. Not even to prove anything. Just to have it, in case someone down the road tried to twist the story. I labeled the file Mortgage Cancel Receipt and saved it in a folder I'd started recently called For Records. Then I pulled out the small black notebook I kept in my kitchen drawer. I hadn't used it much in the past, but tonight it felt right. On the first clean page, I wrote, December 14th, canceled the payment. First time in years I chose myself. I closed the book and leaned back in my chair. The room felt quieter than usual, but not heavy, more like a space I finally fit inside. That night, I cooked a proper dinner, pasta with sausage garlic bread, even steamed green beans. Ate it slowly, with music playing low in the background. When the last bite was done, I looked around. No dishes piled in the sink, no voice in my head asking, shouldn't you be sending that money? It was just me, and for once, that felt like enough. The next evening, I ran out to grab some eggs and bread from the corner market. Snow flurries were starting again. I pulled my beanie low and braced against the wind. As I rounded the dairy aisle, I nearly bumped into Gordon. He gave me a nod, then tilted his head toward the counter. You eat yet? Not really, I said. Was just grabbing a couple things. Come by. Shannon made extra. Chicken pot pie. Not that frozen kind either. I almost said no. Almost gave the usual excuse about needing to get back. But I stopped myself. All right, I said. Thanks. We walked the short block to his place. His porch light was already on. the warmth of it spilling over the steps like welcome. Inside, Shannon smiled, handed me a plate like I'd been expected. And I guess maybe I had. We ate in the kitchen, Gordon talking about a busted pipe at the rec center, Shannon complaining about the school board again. I listened more than I spoke. But when I laughed at something Gordon said, I realized it had been a while since I'd done that without forcing it. After dinner, Shannon brought out apple pie. As she sliced it, Gordon looked at me and said, "You know, you can't pick your family, but you can sure as hell pick your peace." I didn't say anything at first, but I nodded. Because something inside me had begun to thaw, and not from the pie. When I got back home, I slipped off my coat, kicked off my boots, and walked straight to my desk. I opened the laptop, printed the screenshot of the canceled payment, and folded it neatly. I wrote, "In case they ask," on the outside and slid it into an envelope. Then I put it in the drawer with the voice memos, the receipts, and that one birthday card they forgot to sign. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly, but it was a record. They weren't done talking about me, just louder this time, and to the wrong person. It was barely past sunrise when I saw the envelope again. The holiday card, still sitting on the corner of my kitchen counter where I'd tossed it a few days earlier. I hadn't opened it. Part of me assumed it was just another generic message, something bought in a bulk box at the pharmacy. But that morning, as the coffee brewed and the apartment filled with the scent of dark roast, I picked it up. The seal was loose. I opened it with a finger, no rush. Inside, a glossy card. Glitter embossed across a snowy village scene. Inside, "Wishing you warmth and peace this season. Love from Mom and Dad." No Lazaro, no personalization. No note in Coraline's neat cursive. Just a card that could have been sent to a neighbor or someone who delivered their groceries. I stared at it for a few seconds before folding it shut. Then I pressed it flat and slid it into the trash can without a sound. I didn't tear it, didn't throw it, just let it vanish among the coffee grounds and onion skins. Later that morning, I decided to clean out my voicemail. There were a few spam calls, a reminder from the dentist, and a saved message from Coraline. I didn't remember leaving it there. I played it. It wasn't a voicemail. It was a voice memo, her voice, and Thaddeus's. She must have sent it by accident months ago, recorded for notes or maybe a backup plan, but she never deleted it. And somehow, it sat on my phone all this time. I didn't breathe as I listened. "We can't let Lazaro think he's in control just because he pays," Coraline said, her tone flat, businesslike. Thaddeus replied, "We'll start rerouting the mortgage next year. He won't even notice." Coraline laughed a little. "We'll tell him it's for his own good. He always wants to be the hero." I played it twice, not because I couldn't believe it, but because I wanted to hear every word again. Slowly, carefully, like reading the terms of a contract before signing. Then I forwarded the audio file to myself and labeled the email evidence. I didn't rage, I didn't pace. I stood, grabbed my jacket, and walked out to my truck. The cold hit my skin, but it didn't register. I reached into the glove box, pulled out an old lighter I hadn't touched in a year, and lit a cigarette. A bad habit, one I'd kicked for good reasons. But in that moment, I needed the ritual. The fire, the inhale, the burn. It wasn't sadness anymore. Not grief. Not even betrayal. It was strategy. Around noon, I got a text from Coraline. "Hope the card reached you. We miss you." I stared at the message longer than I should have, then typed back, "It did. No name, no soul, just like the invitation list." She didn't respond, and that, in itself, said more than if she had. That evening, I opened a fresh sheet of paper and wrote a title at the top, "What I've Paid versus What They Acknowledged." I listed every payment by month, not just the dollar amounts, but the purpose. January, mortgage. February, house insurance. March, furnace repair. April, groceries when Leander lost his job. Beside each line, I left a blank space. Then, I drew a red line across the page and wrote, mentions, thank yous, acknowledgement. The space remained empty. By the time I finished, the page looked more like a eulogy than an invoice, a summary of years spent investing in something that had no returns. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a flash drive, copied the voice memo onto it, labeled the file simply Mortgage Control MP3. I slid the drive into a small padded envelope and wrote one line on the outside in sharp black ink. I don't scream, I record. They weren't just coming for control, they were about to come knocking. It was late morning when I drove across town to finally close out an old savings account I'd barely touched since my 20s. I'd been meaning to do it for months, but between the job sites and the emotional mess my family left behind, it had fallen off the radar. With things shifting, I figured it was time to tighten up my paperwork. I brought the flash drive with me, mostly out of habit now, just in case. The bank lobby was quiet, heater humming overhead, pine-scented air freshener pretending it could mask the stale coffee smell. I waited patiently for my name to be called, staring at the floor tiles, not thinking about much until I heard, Mr. Cortez? Marcy, the woman who always remembered my name and never asked unnecessary questions, smiled politely and waved me over. I followed her to her desk, handed over my ID, and explained what I needed. Easy enough, she said, pulling up my profile on her screen. We'll just make sure everything's squared away. She paused. Her eyebrows lifted just enough to be noticeable. I watched her face shift. Not in alarm, but in that way people do when they see something they shouldn't have seen before it's too late. Just 1 second, she said, clicking through more screens. What's wrong? I asked, already knowing the answer would sting. There's an authorization request here, a mortgage access update, filed 2 weeks ago. I leaned forward, heart thudding slower than usual. What kind of update? She turned the monitor slightly. There it was. A PDF of a signed document requesting the transfer of my mortgage authorization to Leander. And at the bottom? My signature. Except it wasn't mine. The letters were close, but not close enough. The loops were wrong. The tail on the Z was flat. The spacing looked too clean. My breath stayed in my chest, unspent. I didn't sign that, I said, voice tight. Marcy glanced up at me, then back at the screen, her mouth pressed into a thin line. I figured, she said quietly. I flagged it when it came in. It didn't feel right. She typed something, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. We have time-stamped logs from the day it was submitted, and surveillance footage. If you'd like copies, I can request them. I nodded slowly. Yeah, please. I'd appreciate that more than you know. She printed the document and slid it across the desk, then opened a drawer and pulled out a release form for the footage. As I signed, she said, You've been with us a long time. I thought, if something was off, you'd want to know. I met her eyes, steady. You may have just saved me from something much bigger. Back in the truck, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there holding the forged document in my lap, sunlight pouring through the windshield like it didn't know what I'd just seen. I opened the Notes app on my phone. Intent to defraud, documented, evidence, building, witness, Marcy. I closed the app, then exhaled slowly through my nose. It wasn't about revenge, it never had been. But I wasn't going to sit quietly while people I once called family rewrote legal truths under my name. I drove home slower than usual, eyes flicking from the road to the dashboard clock. Every red light gave me another 30 seconds to think. By the time I pulled into my spot, I already had a plan forming, one step at a time. Paper trail first, then decision. That night, as I settled into my couch, the glow from the desk lamp casting long shadows across the floor, my phone buzzed. Thaddeus. I stared at the screen until it stopped vibrating. He didn't leave a message, not even a, "Hey, call me." Just a missed call sitting there like a test I wasn't about to fail. No apology, no explanation. Just silence trying to sweep everything under a rug they thought I wouldn't look under. I got up, walked to my desk, and opened the top drawer. Slid the forged document in next to the flash drive from earlier that week. As I closed the drawer, I whispered, "If they want a war they can't win, I'll give them one they'll never forget." But when the bank finally called them, not even Megan's voice could save them. Earlier that day, I was wrapping up a site walkthrough when my phone buzzed again. I figured it was another auto notification or a receipt from the bank confirming my updated account settings. But it wasn't. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. No name attached. Just a single audio file. I waited until I was back in my truck to play it. It was Megan. Her voice clipped and loud, no effort to hide the venom. "He's doing this on purpose," she said. "He wants us to suffer. He's trying to punish Mom and Dad, make them look bad. He's jealous and I'm sick of pretending otherwise." I didn't move. Just sat there staring at the phone. I knew the tone. This wasn't a conversation meant for me. The background noise told me it was recorded in a group voice chat. Maybe it was one of those family group vent sessions, or maybe she forgot to switch chats. Either way, someone, some cousin apparently fed up, sent it to me anonymously. I played it again, this time with earbuds. I closed my eyes and let every syllable land. The anger, the entitlement, the ease with which she twisted everything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't hurt. She was cruel. When the message ended, I didn't save it. I didn't forward it. I didn't need to. I deleted it from my phone, but not from my memory. I headed home, threw my jacket over the chair, and poured myself a drink. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to stew. I just stood there, glass in hand, watching the light fade out through the slats of the blinds. The knock came just after 9 p.m. Firm, rhythmic, not impatient, but not tentative either. I froze. My gut knew before my feet moved. I walked to the door, flipped the switch on the porch light, and looked through the peephole. Coraline. Thaddeus. Megan. Bundled in coats, shoulders tense, faces pale from the wind, or maybe from something heavier. I opened the door only a few inches, the chain still locked. No one said anything for a moment. Then Coraline stepped forward. We need somewhere to stay, just for a couple of nights." Her voice cracked near the end. She didn't bother smiling. Megan didn't look up. Her arms were crossed, and she kept her eyes locked on the step. Thaddeus stood in the back, hands in his pockets like he was trying to disappear into them. I leaned against the frame. No anger. Just wait. "Why now?" Coraline blinked. "We got a notice. From the bank." I nodded slowly. Megan finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "We didn't know it would get this bad." I looked her dead in the face. "Yes, you did." Coraline moved forward again, just an inch. "It's temporary, just until we get things sorted." I sighed. Not with frustration, but with finality. "I'm not your enemy," I said, "but I'm no longer your shelter either." Coraline's mouth trembled, her shoulders dropped. Thaddeus didn't say a word. Megan's lips pressed tight, but still she wouldn't look at me. "I've got a bed and a roof," I added. "And peace. You gave me none of those when I needed them. They stood there, the wind whipping around their feet, snow starting to collect on their hoods. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm just not open." I closed the door gently, then locked it. Inside, I walked to the kitchen and started the kettle. The apartment was warm, quiet, steady, like it had been waiting for me to notice it was enough. I sat at the table with a cup of black coffee, the steam curling in the lamplight. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, howling like it knew someone had been shut out. And this time it wasn't me. But when silence was broken, so was their protection. It had been 2 days since I closed the door on them, literally and metaphorically. Since then, nothing. No knock, no text, no sudden realization from any of them. And I didn't need it. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table, same spot where I'd once budgeted every cent to make sure Coraline and Thaddeus never missed a mortgage payment. I pulled out the spreadsheet. 24 rows, color-coded, every single entry dated, noted, and confirmed. 2 years, $7,000. Month by month, it stared back at me. Not numbers, not receipts, but memories of silence, avoidance, and unearned entitlement. I printed 6 copies, folded each with care, slipped them into envelopes. The first envelope I labeled, "In case you forgot who paid for your piece." Just after dawn, I put on my jacket and walked 3 blocks in the wind, past the familiar sidewalk cracks near their house, past the mailbox that had once held cards addressed to "Our Son." Now I left an envelope taped to their front door, right where a wreath would have been, had they been celebrating like a normal family. Above the flap, I wrote, "For your records, you seemed to forget." I kept walking, dropped the second envelope at Gordon's house. He didn't say anything when I handed it to him, just nodded. That was enough. Later that evening, I walked to the community center where the neighborhood board met every third Thursday. Nothing formal, nothing fancy, just people gathering to discuss zoning issues, potholes, and sometimes who left their trash bins out too long. I'd never spoken at one before. But tonight I signed my name to the speaker list. Last spot. When my name was called, the room went quiet. Some folks knew me, most didn't. But everyone listened. I stepped forward. No notes, no rehearsed lines, just me and 2 sheets of paper in hand. "I've paid $7,000 over the last 2 years to help my family stay in their home," I began. "I didn't ask for praise, I didn't expect parades, I did it because that's what you do, for family." A few heads nodded. "But 2 weeks ago," I continued, voice steady, "they showed up at my door, asking for help again. Not once. Not once. Did they ever say thank you? They told me to stay away from Christmas dinner to keep things peaceful. They said I made people uncomfortable, and they tried to take the very mortgage I paid under my name and reroute it without telling me." I held up the printout. "This is every payment I made, every single month, all $7,000 of it." Murmurs began in the back. Someone whispered, "Wow." I lowered the paper and met Coraline's eyes. She and Thaddeus were sitting in the back corner, arms crossed, lips tight. Leander wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. "I'm not telling you this for pity," I said. "I'm telling you this because I've learned something." I paused, then finished. "Some people don't lose homes. They lose their humanity." No applause, just silence. Heavy, respectful silence. Then, as I stepped down, one woman clapped once, then another. A few nodded. Gordon stood and put a hand on my shoulder as I passed. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the truth needs a microphone." I walked out alone, the cold stinging my cheeks, my breath fogging the air. The copies of the ledger were still in my coat pocket. My proof, my armor. But I didn't need to hand them out anymore. I'd already said what mattered. They could smear my name in their circles. They could play the martyr. But they couldn't say I stayed quiet. Walking past the rows of streetlights buzzing faintly overhead, I thought about all the times I'd waited for permission. To speak, to be included, to matter. I didn't need their permission anymore. I whispered, to no one and everyone, they'll never erase me again. But when desperation knocks, it doesn't always wait for forgiveness first. The morning after the council meeting, I woke up to 12 unread messages. Most were from numbers I didn't save, some from neighbors I barely spoke to, others from folks I hadn't heard from since high school. One of them was Gordon. "Check the community page," he wrote. "You went viral in 3 zip codes." I clicked the link he'd attached, and there it was. A screenshot of my speech posted on the community Facebook group. Under the photo of me at the mic, someone had typed out my closing words. "Some people don't lose homes, they lose their humanity." It had over 100 shares and comments like wildfire. Some applauded, some asked for context, and a few, of course, tried to frame me as ungrateful. But most knew. By midday, I'd gotten 2 voicemails, one from an old family friend who hadn't called in years. "I didn't know," she said, voice trembling. "If I had, I swear I'd have said something. I'm so sorry." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Sorry didn't fix it, but it still meant something. Another neighbor left a message. "Saw Coraline crying by the post office today. Just thought you'd want to know." I didn't. And yet, I listened to that message twice. Gordon texted around 5. "Thaddeus skipped poker night. First time in years." I didn't reply, but I smiled. Later that night, I sat at my laptop just out of habit and clicked over to Coraline's profile. I wasn't looking for anything, just confirmation. And I got it. Half the family pictures were gone. Thanksgiving 2021, deleted. 4th of July at Lake Orion, gone. The one photo she'd once pinned. Megan and Leander standing in front of the fireplace, me cropped out just enough to be unrecognizable. Still there. But the comments had changed. Under one, a neighbor wrote, "Funny, you forgot someone again." No one responded. And that, for once, wasn't my silence. I went to the grocery store just to stretch my legs. The checkout line was slow. A woman I didn't recognize turned to me, eyes narrowed. Not in judgment, but familiarity. "You're Lazaro, right?" she asked. "From the council thing?" "Yeah," I said. She didn't smile, didn't fawn, just nodded once. "You said what needed saying. Took guts. Took pain too, I can tell." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. As I walked back to my truck, I realized something new. These people didn't pity me. They didn't see me as broken. They saw me as someone who stood up. That scared me a little. But it also lit something inside I hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. That evening, I got home and checked my mailbox before heading inside. Among bills and flyers, there was one envelope, no return address, handwritten in tight cursive. Inside, a single folded note. "You deserved better. We all knew it. We were just too cowardly to say it before." No name, no signature, just truth left in paper form. I walked inside, set the envelope on my kitchen table, and reached for the magnet that held my grocery list on the fridge. It read, "Truth." I replaced the list with the note. Then I poured myself a glass of water. And I stood there, letting the silence wrap around me. Not like a trap this time, but a room with no one yelling, no one gaslighting, no one denying. Just stillness. And clarity. It started the same way it always had. A knock on the door. But this time it wasn't hurried or loud. It was measured. One knock, a pause, then another. I didn't rush to open it. I stood in the middle of my kitchen listening to that second knock, feeling the weight behind it. Then I walked to the door, slow and calm. No chain lock this time. I opened it. Thaddeus stood there alone, shoulders sagging under his winter coat. His hands were red from the cold, and he clutched a worn manila envelope, like it might fly away if he didn't hold it tight enough. "Can I come in for a second?" he asked, eyes not meeting mine. I stepped aside. He walked in like someone unfamiliar with my space, even though this wasn't his first time here. He sat at the kitchen table, laid the envelope down like a confession. "We're out of options, son," he said, voice low. "Thought you should see this." I didn't respond. I just opened the envelope and pulled out the document inside. It was a foreclosure notice, an official one from the bank. Final demand, 30 days to pay or surrender the property, 3 months unpaid. The home I grew up in was now days away from being reclaimed by numbers on paper and signatures on forms. I read it once. Then again. Then I laid it flat on the table, smoothing the creases with the edge of my palm. Thaddeus cleared his throat, trying to fill the silence. "Coraline hasn't eaten much in a week. Leander, he's locked himself in the basement, refuses to talk to anyone." Still, I said nothing. My eyes remained on the bank letter. The ink bled a little near the bottom where his thumb had gripped it too tight. I waited, because I needed to hear it. But it never came. "No, we're sorry. No, we were wrong. Just need, just desperation disguised as family." "You didn't knock when I was skipping meals to send you money," I finally said, voice even. "Didn't knock when you rerouted that mortgage behind my back." He opened his mouth to object, but I lifted a hand. "No, you're here now because the envelope has your name on it, that's all." He looked down at his hands, now clenched on the table like they were holding on to pride. "I'm not asking for much," he muttered. "Just a few nights until we figure something out." I stood, picked up the foreclosure notice and placed it back in the envelope. I handed it to him. "That's not how this works anymore." He stared at me like he didn't recognize who I'd become. I walked to the door, opened it wide, not as an invitation but as instruction. Thaddeus stood slowly. His face had aged 10 years since the last time we were in the same room. He took the envelope and walked out without another word. I closed the door behind him, locked it. Then I stood there for a long minute, listening to the absence he left behind. It wasn't anger that burned in me. It was clarity. I walked over to the window. Snow had started again, light at first, brushing against the glass. I took a breath and whispered, "Now you get to feel what I lived with, powerless, unseen." I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. I didn't even open the message this time. Thaddeus's name flashed across the screen, one more ding in a long chain of interruptions that no longer held weight. I deleted it with the same casual motion I used to check the weather. There was no anger left. Just a dull understanding that I'd drawn my line, and I wasn't moving it for anyone. The foreclosure envelope he'd brought days ago sat on the corner of my desk. I slipped it into the drawer, tucked under a stack of unpaid time, and swallowed words. I didn't lock it away out of spite. I kept it there to remind myself, closure isn't forgetting. It's choosing what stays closed. That night, I filled out an online application for a local mentorship program. It asked why I wanted to volunteer. I typed, then backspaced. Then typed again, "I've been through hard things. I know how to listen." It wasn't about saving anyone. It was about using the same energy they drained from me for something that might actually grow. 2 days later, Gordon invited me to his backyard. He'd built a small fire pit behind his shed, with mismatched chairs around it. 3 neighbors were already there when I arrived, bundled up in flannel, cradling mugs of hot cider. Nobody asked for details. Nobody gossiped. We just talked. About local construction projects. About how the supermarket's new manager looked 12. Then someone turned to me quietly and asked, "So what happened with your family?" I didn't flinch. They drew the line. I just decided not to let them erase me anymore. They didn't pry. No one asked for names or backstory. One man passed me a bottle of something sharp and handed me a clean cup. I nodded thanks. Later, I found myself speaking without meaning to. "I don't hate them," I said, watching the fire shift. "But I don't trust them, and I'm done handing out grace like it doesn't cost me." Someone murmured, "That's real." I exhaled slowly. Forgiveness is free, but rebuilding costs time, and peace isn't something I owe anyone. No one argued. No one offered cliches. The next morning, I rearranged my apartment. Not big changes, just enough to claim it as fully mine. I moved my reading chair near the window, hung up a photo I'd taken of the river trail, added a small bookshelf, the flash drive with the voice memos, the one that held years of swallowed hurt, I placed inside a labeled envelope and stored it in a box. I didn't delete it. I just didn't need to listen again. And somewhere in between moving furniture and stacking books, I made a quiet vow. If I teach someone else how to stand up early, maybe they won't have to bleed like I did. That evening, I returned to Gordon's fire pit. No one spoke when I arrived. They just made space for me on a folding chair. I threw a log into the fire, watched the flames catch, watched the shadows flicker. For once, warmth came from where it should, not from obligation, not from pretending, but from choice. Sunday morning came quiet, the kind of quiet that carried weight. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence right before something final lands. When I opened my apartment door, a slim manila envelope lay on the floor. No knock, just paper and truth. I picked it up, stamped in black across the top. Filed Wayne County Civil Division. Below it, my name. Petitioner, Lazaro C. Under that, respondents, Thaddeus C. and Coraline C. Inside was the confirmation I'd expected. My lawsuit, officially processed, officially real. A court date in the upper corner. A timeline beneath. And the details in print, financial fraud, forged signature, emotional distress. I sat down, reread it. Not to relish it, but to feel it settle in. This wasn't vengeance. This was release. It wasn't for punishment, it was protection. For the version of me who paid in silence. For the one who almost broke waiting for someone to choose him back. Everything I needed had already been collected. Marcy's witness statement. The bank logs. The voice memo of Megan. The spreadsheet of payments. Even the returned holiday card with no names. They were no longer emotional debris. They were exhibits. That afternoon, I walked 5 blocks to their house. No snow this time, just dry air and the brittle sharpness of winter sun. I didn't ring the bell. I slid the envelope into their mailbox, closed the metal door gently, and turned. Coraline was in the window, framed behind lace curtains. Our eyes met. No words. Just years of stories, pressed flat by the weight of one final act. I didn't stop walking. Later that day, I headed to the community center and handed a check to Ms. Estelle at the front desk. $3,000, what I would have paid to the mortgage this quarter. For the youth mentoring program, I said. She blinked. That's very generous. I'm not cutting people off, I told her. I'm just rerouting everything. Back home, I sat at my desk, opened my digital profile, and made changes that mattered. I updated my emergency contact, removed Coraline, entered Gordon's name instead. Then I opened a file of old documents and cleaned house. My will, my insurance forms, my backup contacts. They all changed that night. What once belonged to legacy through guilt now belonged to clarity through choice. Last, I climbed into the attic and pulled down the box of family photos. They weren't destroyed. I labeled the box, "Archive, do not carry." Then I tucked it away in the farthest corner. "I don't destroy history," I whispered to myself. "I just don't carry it anymore." At twilight, I poured a fresh cup of coffee and sat by the window where the street lamp buzzed its usual hum. I held the warm mug, leaned back, and looked out over the quiet. "They wanted me silent, small, invisible," I said. Then I smiled. I left them loud, legal, and unforgettable. Some lessons don't come wrapped in comfort. They come wrapped in clarity. Looking back, I didn't go through what I did just to win an argument or prove a point. I did it to reclaim something many of us lose quietly: our worth, our voice, our boundaries. And if you're watching this, and you've ever felt used, erased, or invisible within your own family, let this story be your mirror and your reminder. You have the right to choose peace over performance. You don't owe anyone your silence when they've spent years misunderstanding your strength. The truth? Healing isn't always about fixing relationships. Sometimes it's about letting go with dignity and redirecting that love toward people and places that grow with you, not against you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with someone you love? What did it cost you? And what did it save? Leave your story in the comments, or just let me know where you're watching from. Drop a 1 if this story hit home. Drop a 2 if you're still somewhere in the middle of yours. Let's connect. And hey, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Truly. If this story stirred something in you, please hit that subscribe button and join me for the next one. I promise, we've got more stories to tell, and you won't want to miss them.